Sometimes the strongest person in a parking lot is the one everyone mistakenly believes is powerless. The afternoon sun hung low over the sprawling parking lot of Brookside Town Center, casting long golden shadows across rows of parked cars. Families pushed shopping carts toward their vehicles. Children laughed as they chased one another between neatly painted parking spaces. A street musician played soft jazz near the entrance, filling the warm air with a melody that made the ordinary afternoon feel almost peaceful. Then everything stopped. A sharp metallic click echoed across the lot. Every head turned. Officer Ryan Mitchell stood beside a dark blue luxury SUV with one hand firmly gripping the wrist of an elderly black woman. His freshly pressed police uniform reflected the afternoon sunlight, and his expression carried the unmistakable confidence of someone convinced he was protecting the public. The elderly woman never resisted. Her silver curls framed a gentle face marked more by kindness than age. She wore a neatly pressed lavender cardigan over a simple floral dress, comfortable walking shoes, and a small pearl necklace that caught the sunlight whenever she moved. Her name was Evelyn Jackson. At 72 years old, she carried herself with remarkable dignity. Even now. Even with cold steel wrapped around her wrists. The second handcuff closed with another loud click. Several shoppers gasped. A young mother instinctively covered her daughter's eyes. An older man stopped loading groceries into his truck, unable to believe what he was seeing. Ryan stepped backward and spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Ma'am, this vehicle has been reported under suspicious circumstances. Until I verify ownership, you are being detained." Evelyn looked quietly at the officer. Her breathing remained steady. Her voice never rose. "Officer," she said gently, "the registration is inside my purse, and the title is in the glove compartment. That is my car." Ryan barely glanced toward the SUV. "I've heard every excuse imaginable. I wasn't making an excuse. I said enough." His words landed harder than the handcuffs themselves. Imagine standing there after decades of honest living, only to have complete strangers look at you as though you suddenly no longer belonged beside your own car. Imagine watching people record your humiliation before anyone even asked for the truth. Phones began appearing one after another. Within seconds, multiple cameras pointed toward Evelyn. Some whispered. Some frowned. Others simply watched. No one knew exactly what had happened. They only knew an elderly grandmother stood handcuffed beside a vehicle she calmly insisted belonged to her. Ryan motioned toward another patrol officer. "Run the plates again. They're already coming back registered." Ryan frowned. "Verify them anyway." The younger officer hesitated before walking back toward the patrol vehicle. Something about the situation no longer felt routine. Evelyn remained perfectly still. She never pleaded. She never shouted. Instead, she looked across the parking lot toward the shopping bags resting neatly inside the SUV through the rear window. There were fresh groceries. A bouquet of white lilies. And a birthday card resting carefully on the passenger seat. She had been on her way home. Nothing more. Nothing less. The afternoon breeze gently lifted a loose strand of silver hair across her face. She smiled faintly, almost to herself. Not because she accepted what was happening. But because she had learned long ago that dignity was something no pair of handcuffs could ever take away. Ryan mistook that quiet smile for defiance. He had no idea that before the afternoon was over, the crowded parking lot would witness a truth powerful enough to silence every accusation, and forever change the way everyone there remembered that ordinary summer day. The crowd continued to grow around the parking lot, drawn not by curiosity alone but by the unmistakable feeling that something about the scene was deeply wrong. Shopping carts stood abandoned beside parked cars. Conversations faded into uneasy whispers. Even the cheerful music from the street musician near the entrance seemed strangely distant now. Evelyn Jackson remained exactly where Officer Ryan Mitchell had placed her. Her wrists rested quietly in front of her, joined by polished steel. handcuffs that reflected the afternoon sun. Yet there was no panic in her eyes. She stood with the quiet grace of someone who had spent a lifetime refusing to let humiliation define her. A teenage employee from the grocery store stepped closer. "Officer," he said cautiously, "I saw her pull up in that SUV. She drove it herself." Ryan barely looked at him. "Step back, son." "But I said step back." The young man lowered his head and retreated, though uncertainty remained written across his face. Across the parking lot, more phones were raised. Someone quietly started live streaming. Others exchanged confused glances. An elderly woman standing near the pharmacy entrance shook her head. "That lady shops here every week." A man beside her replied softly, "Maybe the officer knows something we don't." That single sentence lingered in the air. Sometimes people believe authority before they believe their own eyes. Imagine standing in front of dozens of strangers while your character is judged before your words are even heard. Imagine knowing the truth but realizing that truth often speaks more slowly than assumptions. Evelyn looked toward Ryan with the same calm expression she had worn from the beginning. "Officer," she said gently, "would you please check the registration inside the glove compartment? The keys are still in my purse." Ryan crossed his arms. "I'll decide what needs to be checked. You deserve to know the facts." "I already have enough facts." His confidence never wavered. To him, hesitation looked like weakness. Certainty looked like professionalism. The younger patrol officer returned from the cruiser holding a small tablet. "Sir." Ryan turned impatiently. "What?" "The plate registration matches the vehicle." Ryan frowned. "And?" "It lists Evelyn Jackson as the registered owner." For a brief moment, silence settled between the two officers. Ryan looked toward Evelyn, then back at the tablet. There could still be an issue with the title. The DMV record doesn't indicate one. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Run it again." The younger officer hesitated before nodding. "Yes, sir." As he walked away, he glanced back at Evelyn with an expression that seemed to carry more sympathy than suspicion. Evelyn noticed. She offered him the smallest smile. Not because the situation had improved, but because kindness costs nothing, even on difficult days. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers from the bouquet resting inside the SUV. Beside it sat a neatly wrapped gift bag with silver ribbon and a handwritten birthday card waiting to be delivered. None of it looked unusual. None of it suggested criminal activity. Yet the handcuffs remained. Ryan stepped closer. "You've stayed awfully calm through all this." Evelyn met his eyes. "When you've lived long enough," she answered softly, "you learn that losing your temper rarely helps someone find the truth." Those words unsettled him more than anger ever could. Before Ryan could respond, the distant sound of approaching sirens echoed across the shopping center. Not one patrol vehicle. Several. The people filming slowly turned toward the entrance of the parking lot as a line of official county police SUVs rolled into view with steady precision. No emergency lights flashed. No sirens blared now. But something about their arrival caused every officer already at the scene to straighten instinctively. Ryan watched the convoy approach, unaware that the next few minutes would change far more than the outcome of one ordinary afternoon. The county police SUVs rolled into the parking lot with quiet precision, their dark windows reflecting the fading afternoon sun. There were no flashing lights now. No blaring sirens. Just a calm, unmistakable presence that immediately changed the atmosphere. Conversation stopped. The people recording lowered their phones for a moment, trying to understand why so many command vehicles had arrived over what appeared to be a routine detention. Officer Ryan Mitchell straightened his uniform. He instinctively adjusted the radio clip to his shoulder and stepped away from Evelyn Jackson, believing the arriving supervisors would confirm he had acted correctly. After all, he had followed his instincts. Or so he believed. Evelyn remained exactly where she was. The handcuffs still rested around her wrists. The bouquet of white lilies remained visible. Through the SUV window, their bright petals glowing softly beneath the afternoon light. A little girl standing beside her grandfather tugged gently on his sleeve. "Grandpa," she whispered, "why is that grandma still smiling?" The old man looked at Evelyn for several seconds before answering. "Because some people don't let difficult moments decide who they are." Evelyn heard the words. She turned toward the child and offered the same gentle smile she had given the young patrol officer earlier. No bitterness. No anger. Only quiet kindness. Imagine carrying a lifetime of dignity into a moment designed to take it away. Imagine realizing that the people watching are learning more from your calm than they ever could from your outrage. The lead SUV came to a smooth stop near the edge of the parking lot. Several uniformed command officers stepped out first. They surveyed the scene without speaking. Their expressions were professional, measured, and unusually serious. Ryan walked toward them with confidence. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said. "We have a possible vehicle ownership issue under investigation." One of the command officers looked briefly toward Evelyn. Then toward the luxury SUV. Then back at Ryan. "Have you confirmed ownership?" "We're still verifying." "The registration?" "It matches her name." "The driver's license?" Ryan hesitated. "I haven't examined it personally yet." The command officer remained silent. His eyes shifted toward the younger patrol officer, who stood nearby holding the electronic records tablet. The younger officer quietly spoke. "Sir, the DMV registration, insurance, and license information all identify Ms. Evelyn Jackson as the lawful owner." Ryan immediately responded. There could still be fraud involved. Nobody answered. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Across the parking lot, shoppers continued gathering. Many had stopped filming. Now they simply watched. Something about the command officer's reaction suggested this situation was no longer as simple as it first appeared. Evelyn looked toward the sky. The clouds that had drifted across the afternoon earlier were beginning to separate, allowing warm sunlight to spread across the parking lot once again. She closed her eyes for only a moment. Not to escape. To remember. This shopping center had once been one of her late husband's favorite places to bring the family every Saturday morning. Years had passed. Children had grown. Grandchildren had arrived. Life had changed. Yet she had never stopped believing that kindness remained stronger than humiliation. Ryan's radio suddenly crackled. A calm voice spoke only a few words. "They're here." Ryan turned toward the parking lot entrance. Another black county vehicle, different from the others, slowly approached. Its simple markings carried no dramatic display. But every command officer standing nearby immediately shifted to attention. The younger patrol officer quietly removed his cap. Even the crowd seemed to sense that someone important had just arrived. Ryan watched the vehicle roll closer, completely unaware that the person about to step through its door would know Evelyn Jackson far better than any government record ever could. The black command SUV came to a slow, deliberate stop just a few yards from where Evelyn Jackson stood handcuffed beside her own vehicle. Its engine fell silent, yet the quiet somehow carried more authority than flashing lights ever could. Every officer in the parking lot instinctively straightened. Conversations disappeared. Even the people filming seemed to hold their breath. Officer Ryan Mitchell stepped forward confidently, expecting nothing more than another supervisor arriving to review a routine detention. He adjusted his duty belt, squared his shoulders, and rehearsed the explanation in his mind. Suspicious vehicle. Possible ownership issue. Temporary detention. Simple. Professional. Defensible. At least, that was how he intended to present it. The driver's door opened. A tall African-American man in his early 50s stepped out wearing the dark command uniform of the county police chief. His silver collar insignia caught the afternoon sunlight, while years of leadership showed in the calm confidence of every measured step he took. His name was Marcus Jackson. Without saying a word, he surveyed the entire scene. The patrol. Vehicles. The gathering crowd. The grocery bags visible through the SUV window. The bouquet of white lilies resting carefully on the passenger seat. Finally, his eyes settled on Evelyn. For the briefest moment, something changed in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. Ryan noticed the pause. He interpreted it as concern over the investigation. He walked forward immediately. "Chief," Ryan began confidently, "we've detained the individual while verifying ownership of the vehicle. Registration is still being reviewed." Marcus didn't answer. He kept walking. Past Ryan. Past the patrol cruiser. Straight toward Evelyn. Imagine believing the most important person arriving is coming to support your decision. Imagine watching that same person walk past you without asking a single question. Ryan turned to follow. "Chief, we have reason to believe," Marcus raised one hand gently. Not aggressively. Simply asking for silence. Ryan stopped speaking. The parking lot became completely still. Evelyn looked at the approaching chief with the same peaceful smile she had carried all afternoon. She didn't appear nervous. She didn't seem surprised. She simply waited. Marcus stopped only a few feet away from her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then his eyes dropped quietly to the handcuffs around her wrists. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The officers standing nearby exchanged uncertain glances. The younger patrol officer slowly lowered the tablet in his hands. Something felt different now. Something no one could quite explain. Marcus finally looked back into Evelyn's eyes. His voice, when it came, was gentle enough that only the closest people heard the first words. "Are you hurt?" Evelyn gave a tiny shake of her head. "No, sweetheart." The word barely carried across the afternoon breeze. But it was enough to make Ryan hesitate. "Sweetheart." The chief stepped one pace closer. His expression softened in a way none of the officers present had ever witnessed. People who knew him described him as disciplined. Demanding. Professional. Few had ever seen warmth cross his face while wearing the uniform. Yet now it was unmistakable. A reporter standing near the front quietly lowered her camera. She sensed history unfolding before the lens. Ryan cleared his throat. "Chief, should I continue the investigation?" Marcus slowly turned toward him. There was no anger in his eyes. Only disappointment. Deep. Quiet. Unmistakable. Before answering Ryan, Marcus looked once more at the elderly woman standing patiently with handcuffs around her wrists. The afternoon sunlight broke fully through the clouds, illuminating the silver curls framing Evelyn's face. Then, with a voice calm enough to silence the entire parking lot, Marcus spoke the words that instantly changed everything. "Someone remove those cuffs." He paused. "That's my mother." For a single heartbeat, no one moved. The parking lot seemed to freeze beneath the warm afternoon sun. Shopping carts stood motionless. Cell phones remained suspended in midair. Even the distant sound of traffic seemed to disappear. "That's my mother." The word settled over the crowd with quiet force. Officer Ryan Mitchell stared at County Police Chief Marcus Jackson, waiting for someone to laugh, correct him, or explain that he had misunderstood. No one did. The younger patrol officer immediately stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the handcuffs. I'm sorry, ma'am." The metal clicked open. Evelyn slowly lowered her hands, gently rubbing her wrists without saying a single word of complaint. Marcus closed the remaining distance between them. "Mom," he asked softly, "did anyone hurt you?" Evelyn offered the same peaceful smile she had worn since the beginning. "I'm all right, Marcus." She spoke his name with the quiet affection only a mother could carry. "I've had much harder days than this." Marcus nodded once, though the concern in his eyes remained. He briefly examined the faint red marks left by the cuffs before taking a slow breath. There was disappointment on his face. Not only as a police chief. As a son. Imagine watching your own mother stand handcuffed in a public parking lot while dozens of strangers record the moment. Imagine realizing that everyone wearing your department's uniform represents not only the law, but your family's name. Ryan finally found his voice. "Chief. I didn't know who she was." Marcus turned toward him. His expression remained controlled. "Professional. I believe you." Ryan looked relieved. For less than a second. Marcus continued. "But that isn't the question you should be asking." The relief vanished. "You shouldn't need to know who someone is before treating them with dignity." The sentence was calm. It carried no shouting. No insults. Only truth. Several people quietly lowered their phones. A woman who had been recording since the beginning slowly wiped tears from her eyes. The older man loading groceries earlier removed his baseball cap in silent respect. Marcus looked toward the younger patrol officer. "Did the registration identify the owner?" "Yes, Chief." "Did the driver's license match?" "Yes, Chief." Marcus nodded. "And yet she remained in handcuffs." No one answered. Ryan opened his mouth. "I believe there could still be fraud involved." Marcus looked toward Evelyn's SUV. The registration matched. He glanced at the grocery bags visible through the window. The insurance matched. His eyes settled on the birthday card resting on the passenger seat. The license matched. Then he looked directly at Ryan. "So tell me, what evidence remained?" Ryan searched for an answer. None came. The silence spoke louder than any explanation. Evelyn stepped forward before anyone else could speak. She gently touched her son's arm. "Marcus." He immediately looked at her. She gave the smallest shake of her head. "Don't let anger make this heavier than it already is." Ryan looked at the elderly woman with genuine confusion. After everything that had happened, she wasn't demanding punishment. She wasn't humiliating him. She was trying to calm her own son. Marcus smiled sadly. "You've spent your whole life teaching me that." "And today," Evelyn replied softly, "you have a chance to teach everyone else." The afternoon breeze carried the scent of white lilies across the parking lot once again. The crowd remained silent. Not because they were waiting for another dramatic moment. Because they had just witnessed something far more powerful than authority. They had witnessed grace. And Ryan. Mitchell was beginning to understand that the greatest mistake he had made that afternoon was never about recognizing the county police chief's mother. It was forgetting that every person deserves respect long before anyone asks who they are. The parking lot remained silent long after Evelyn Jackson's handcuffs had been removed. No one seemed eager to leave. The ordinary rhythm of the afternoon had disappeared, replaced by the quiet understanding that everyone present had witnessed something they would remember for years. County Police Chief Marcus Jackson slowly turned toward the officers gathered around him. No one spoke. No one needed instructions to understand the seriousness of the moment. Officer Ryan Mitchell stood motionless beside his patrol vehicle. Only minutes earlier, he had believed confidence was enough. Now he understood that certainty without careful judgment could become its own kind of blindness. Marcus looked calmly at the younger patrol officer. "Please document the scene exactly as it occurred." "Yes, Chief." "No assumptions." "Yes, Chief." "No missing details." The officer nodded again before opening his notebook. Marcus then faced Ryan. His voice remained steady. This department exists to protect people. Ryan lowered his eyes. Yes, Chief. It is not enough to follow procedure. Ryan remained silent. We are expected to follow the facts. Every word carried across the parking lot. Not because Marcus spoke loudly. Because everyone was listening. Imagine realizing that respect is tested most when no one important appears to be watching. Imagine discovering that the person you underestimated has taught an entire crowd a lesson without raising their voice. Ryan finally looked toward Evelyn. I owe you an apology. She met his eyes. He continued. I made assumptions before I finished asking questions. The words came slowly. They were my responsibility. Evelyn nodded gently. Thank you for saying that. She did not demand more. She did not embarrass him in front of the crowd. She simply accepted the apology with the same quiet dignity she had carried from the beginning. Marcus watched his mother for a moment before smiling. Even now. She was teaching. Not through speeches. Not through authority. Through character. A reporter cautiously stepped forward. Chief Jackson, may we ask what happens next? Marcus answered without hesitation. The department will review today's decisions through our normal accountability process. He paused. But I hope people remember something more important than that. The cameras focused on him. My mother deserved respect before anyone knew she was related to me. He glanced toward Evelyn. So does every other person an officer meets. The crowd remained silent. Several people slowly lowered their phones altogether. The little girl who had asked about the smiling grandmother earlier walked a few steps closer while holding her grandfather's hand. She looked up at Evelyn. Are you okay now? Evelyn smiled warmly. I am, sweetheart. The child smiled back. Good. Simple words. Honest words. Sometimes they carry the greatest weight. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the parking lot as families quietly returned to their cars. The street musician began playing again. Shopping carts rolled across the pavement. Life slowly resumed. Before leaving, Evelyn picked up the bouquet of white lilies from her SUV and looked once more at the officers standing nearby. I hope all of you have a safe day. She offered the flowers gentle fragrance to the afternoon breeze before placing them carefully back inside the vehicle. Marcus opened the driver's door for her, just as he had done countless times throughout his life. Not because he was the county police chief. Because he was her son. As they drove away together, Ryan remained standing beside his patrol car, watching until the SUV disappeared beyond the edge of the shopping center. His badge still rested on his uniform. His authority remained the same. But his understanding of it had changed forever. Because that afternoon proved a lesson every uniform should remember. A title may earn attention. A badge may grant authority. But dignity belongs to every person long before anyone learns their name, their family, or their place in the world. And justice begins the moment we choose to remember that truth. Several days passed, but the events in the Brookside Town Center parking lot refused to disappear. The video spread quietly at first. One shopper shared it with a friend. A local community page reposted it. By the end of the week, millions of people had watched the same few minutes unfold. They saw an elderly black grandmother standing peacefully beside her own vehicle. They saw handcuffs. They saw patience. And finally, they saw a county police chief walk across the parking lot and quietly say the words that changed everything. That's my mother. People debated the story online. Some focused on the mistake. Others focused on the apology. But many noticed something else. Throughout the entire encounter, Evelyn Jackson had never raised her voice. She had never insulted anyone. She had never treated another person with the same disrespect she had experienced. That quiet strength became the part people remembered most. Imagine having the opportunity to embarrass someone who embarrassed you. Imagine choosing dignity instead. That choice often says more about character than victory ever could. Inside County Police Headquarters, Chief Marcus Jackson stood before dozens of officers gathered in the department's training auditorium. No reporters had been invited. No cameras were present. This meeting was for one purpose: learning. Marcus stood beside a large projection screen displaying a single photograph. It was not a picture of the parking lot. It was not a picture of the patrol vehicles. It was a photograph of Evelyn smiling while holding one of her grandchildren years earlier. The room remained silent. "My mother is not standing on this screen because she is related to me," Marcus began. "She is standing there because she represents every citizen who deserves fairness before an officer knows anything about their background." No one interrupted. Every officer listened. Ryan Mitchell sat quietly in the third row. His notebook remained open. He had filled several pages already. Not with excuses. With lessons. Marcus continued. "Professional policing begins with facts." He paused. "But exceptional policing begins with humility." The word settled heavily across the room. Ryan lowered his eyes. He remembered every decision he had made that afternoon. Every opportunity to ask another question. Every chance to slow down. Every assumption that had quietly replaced evidence. After the meeting ended, officers slowly filed toward the exit. Ryan remained behind. Marcus noticed. "You wanted to speak?" Ryan nodded. "I've been thinking about that day every hour since it happened." Marcus waited. "I can't change what I did." "No. But I can decide who I become after it." Marcus studied him for a moment before offering a small nod. "That's where accountability begins." Later that evening, Ryan drove to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the county. He parked outside a modest brick home surrounded by blooming flowers. The same bouquet of white lilies from that afternoon now rested inside a vase near the front window. Ryan walked slowly to the porch. His hands felt strangely heavier than they ever had while wearing his uniform. Evelyn answered the door herself. She smiled as though she had expected him. "Good evening, officer." Ryan removed his cap. "I wasn't sure you would want to see me." She stepped aside. Everyone deserves the chance to walk through the right door after taking the wrong path. Ryan entered quietly. The home felt warm. Family photographs covered the walls. Children. Grandchildren. Holiday dinners. Graduation ceremonies. Ordinary moments that reminded him something painfully simple. Before anyone becomes a suspect, a witness, a victim, or a public official, they are first someone's family. Someone's neighbor. Someone's story. And sometimes the greatest lesson an officer can receive is not found inside a policy manual. It is learned while standing in the living room of the person they once failed to truly see. Ryan Mitchell returned to duty several weeks later, but the familiar weight of his badge no longer felt the same. Every morning, before fastening it to his uniform, he found himself remembering a quiet parking lot, a pair of silver handcuffs, and an elderly woman who had answered humiliation with grace. The memory refused to fade. It wasn't because he had been publicly corrected. It was because he had been privately changed. Imagine carrying a lesson that follows you long after everyone else has forgotten the headline. Imagine realizing that growth begins the moment pride finally becomes quiet enough to listen. One cool autumn afternoon, Ryan received a routine dispatch. An elderly man appeared confused outside a neighborhood bank. No crime had been reported. No one was in danger. Years earlier, Ryan might have approached the situation with commands first and questions later. This time, he slowed his patrol car before stepping out. He walked toward the man without placing a hand on his equipment. "Good afternoon, sir," he said with a calm smile. "How can I help you today?" The man looked relieved. I think. I forgot where I parked. Ryan nodded gently. Let's figure it out together. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. The elderly man had become disoriented after a medical appointment. A bank employee located his family. Everything ended peacefully. As Ryan returned to his cruiser, he realized something remarkable. Patience had solved in minutes what force never could. Across town, Evelyn Jackson continued living the same quiet life she had always cherished. Every Saturday she volunteered at the community center, reading stories to children while parents prepared meals for neighborhood families. She never mentioned the parking lot unless someone asked. Even then, she rarely spoke about herself. Instead, she would smile and say, "Everyone has a chance to choose kindness tomorrow, even if they forgot it yesterday." Those words quietly spread throughout the community. Months later, Chief Marcus Jackson invited new police recruits into the department's training academy. He stood before them without showing headlines or viral videos. Instead, he told them a simple story. There will be days when people test your patience, he said. There will be moments when you must make difficult decisions with incomplete information. But never confuse uncertainty with permission to forget someone's humanity. The recruits listened carefully. Some wrote every sentence into their notebooks. Others simply watched the chief with complete attention. Ryan sat near the back of the room as a field training mentor. This time, he wasn't there to defend his past. He was there to help shape someone else's future. After the session ended, a young recruit approached him. "Officer Mitchell," she asked quietly, "what's the most important lesson you've learned?" Ryan looked toward the academy window, where the evening sun cast long shadows across the training grounds. He smiled faintly before answering. Never decide who a person is before you've taken the time to learn the truth. The recruit thanked him and walked away. Ryan remained by the window for another moment. Some lessons arrive through success. Others arrive through mistakes that leave a permanent mark on the heart. As the academy lights came on and another class of officers prepared to serve their community, one truth remained stronger than any badge, title, or uniform. Authority earns responsibility. Character earns trust. And justice is strongest when every person is treated with dignity long before anyone asks who they are, where they come from, or whose family they belong to. 1 year later, the parking lot at Brookside Town Center looked exactly as it always had. Families loaded groceries into their cars. Children laughed beside shopping carts. Sunlight reflected from windshields, and the quiet rhythm of ordinary life continued without anyone noticing the place where one extraordinary lesson had unfolded. Most people walking through the lot had never heard the story. They did not know where Evelyn Jackson had once stood with handcuffs around her wrists. They did not know where Officer Ryan Mitchell had first begun questioning not another person, but himself. Life has a way of moving forward. The question is whether we choose to move forward with it. Imagine leaving behind the worst day of your life, only to discover that it became the beginning of someone else's better one. Imagine realizing that forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. It is refusing to let bitterness become the final chapter. On that same afternoon, Evelyn arrived once again in her dark blue SUV. She parked in nearly the same space. She smiled quietly to herself before stepping out, carrying another bouquet of fresh white lilies. Nothing about her walk suggested fear. Nothing about her expression suggested resentment. She simply continued living the life she had always lived. Inside the shopping center, she greeted employees by name. She asked a cashier about her daughter's college graduation. She thanked a stock clerk for helping an elderly customer reach a shelf. Kindness remained her first language. Outside, a patrol vehicle slowly entered the parking lot. Ryan Mitchell stepped out. He noticed Evelyn almost immediately. For a brief moment, they simply looked at one another across the rows of parked cars. Then Ryan walked over. This time, there were no commands. No assumptions. Only respect. "Good afternoon, Ms. Jackson." Evelyn smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, officer. I wanted to thank you." She tilted her head gently. "For what?" "For showing me the difference between authority and character." Evelyn considered his words before answering. "Authority tells people what you can do." She paused. "Character reminds them what you should do." Ryan nodded quietly. Those words were worth more than any commendation he had ever received. Nearby, another officer approached an elderly couple searching for their vehicle. Ryan watched as the young officer smiled first, asked questions second, and listened before making any assumptions. He recognized the approach immediately. Not because someone had ordered it. Because the culture around him had begun to change. Chief Marcus Jackson often said that real leadership was measured not by speeches but by habits repeated every day. Standing there, Ryan finally understood. Change rarely arrives with applause. It arrives one decision at a time. One conversation at a time. One act of dignity at a time. As the afternoon sun slowly settled beyond the shopping center, Evelyn placed the white lilies inside her SUV and prepared to drive home. Ryan stepped back respectfully. "Have a safe afternoon." "You too, officer." She closed the driver's door and pulled away with the same quiet grace she had carried through every chapter of the story. Ryan remained standing for a moment, watching until the vehicle disappeared beyond the parking lot. Entrance. Then he turned toward another family needing directions and walked forward with patience instead of certainty. Because badges may identify an officer. Titles may identify a leader. But the measure of justice is found in something far simpler. It is found in the choice to see every stranger as a human being before seeing anything else. And sometimes the greatest victory is not proving who was right. It is making sure the next person never has to endure the same wrong.